everyone and their mother loved this book, and I don't know why. Like, why did this win a Goodreads Choice Awards? I'm sorry, I had to say it. Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sydney. Today's video, we will be chatting about all the books that were not it this year. Books that did not hit the mark for me. They fell flat, they didn't hit. Books that I just straight up did not like, whether you like it or not. So hey, what's up? How are you? I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me for a little bit. Here is the disclosure that we must put at the beginning of a video like this because everyone's ego is a little bit fragile. If your favorite book is on this list, then it's not against you, all right? You can love these books, and I hope that you do. I just don't, and that's also okay. So, I'm going to share my opinions. You don't have to agree with me, but I would love to know if you do agree with me because I am a human that really loves that positive reinforcement. Or negative reinforcement, I guess, in this case. Yes, we're talking about my least favorite books in 2022. While some of the books on this list I didn't necessarily hate, they made it on this list because I found more things that I didn't like about the story than things that I did like about the story. And this list in particular isn't necessarily in any order. I don't think that there is like one singular book that I hated more than any other book I read this year. However, all of these have their certain things that I disliked. So let's get into it. One of the very first books that I read this year was The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. I didn't like it. I know for a fact that I listened to this while I was filling out my 2022 bullet journal, and this is the perfect book to have on in the background while you're doing something else because it doesn't require much attention to understand what's happening. There were very few scenes that I felt were memorable. The characters fell very, very flat for me. I really couldn't tell you any of the characters' names, obviously one, but two, their development I felt was very, very two-dimensional, and I was more interested in some side characters than our main character's point of view that we got. Again, I read this in the beginning of the year, so I don't have too much to back myself up because I have since blacked out the story for the most part. But the things I do remember is that the magic system, though it was relatively interesting, I liked that the main character, her powers would change with the seasons, and she was the only witch in this story that had the power of all the seasons, and I think it was an Ever Witch or something. That was cool. I did like that. However, the story itself was it felt like very low stakes. I don't know. The things that were going on could have been so much more interesting. Instead of it being about like the powers and like a high stakes adventure of some sort, it kind of just felt like we were following this girl who was like, woe is me, I have these powers, my life changes with every season, and I'm angry and sad about it. So listen to me talk about it for 300 pages. I just felt like I was bored a lot of the time and there could have been so much more done with this story. I think I gave this 3 stars on Goodreads, but honestly it might be a 2. The next book that I read that I was actually very upset about not liking is Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. This book was like 90 pages or something like that. Maybe less, don't remember. I remember reading the synopsis of this and being like so overly excited because it sounded so unhinged and like it was going to be a whirlwind fever dream of a crazy weird time. And so it wasn't. It was very short. There's not too much to talk about without giving away anything. So what I can say is that I saw what the twist was very, very early in the story, like probably within the first like 5-10 pages. And that's not why I didn't like it, because that's not always a bad thing when you know, guess the twist. What I didn't like about it was the fact that it went exactly how I thought it would go. There was no surprising factor for me. Normally, if I guess a twist or something like that, I am at least counting on, you know, somehow along the way of the story, I am still excited, you know, to be reading it. I don't have to be surprised at the twist, though of course that is one of my favorite things. I want to love the writing. I want to find things within the story that like, oh, I love how they described that, or oh, I can feel myself in this story. I didn't get that. So not only did I guess the plot, how it was written as well, it just fell very flat for me, and I was really sad. I think I gave this 2 or 3 stars, but I think it's a 2. The next book that thoroughly disappointed me is To Sleep in a Sea of Stars by Christopher Paolini. This was actually one of the buddy reads for my book club, and it had very mixed reviews within the Nightcrawlers. I even made Caleb try to read it because I thought that it sounded like it was up his alley. You know, it's like first contact with aliens and like some space opera expedition involving, you know, that situation at hand. The first like 50 pages or so, or like maybe the first couple chapters, I was kind of into, you know, it was exciting. However, I do remember having having a hard time keeping people straight, but that's normally like an issue of mine unless I'm super invested in the storyline. And that's what happened, was I started to not really care about what was happening. And then I stopped connecting who was doing what. And I think that this book in particular might be like a me problem. There was some sort of disconnect within the writing style and how I attach myself to characters in a story. I feel like it was written in a very like matter-of-fact way, and there weren't too many like emotions tied behind the writing of the words. I hope that kind of makes sense. But I made it to, I think, 40 to 50% of the book, don't really remember. And I realized that the thought of picking up the book again just kind of made me upset. Like, I didn't want to. I tried to think about the story and remember what was going on, and I truly, even while I was reading the book, couldn't remember our main characters' names or really relate to anything that was going on. Not even because it's sci-fi. I'm not saying that, like, of course I can't relate to it. I'm not like a deep space explorer, you know what I'm saying? But they weren't relatable on a like emotional sense. Like, again, I think that there was just some sort of disconnect with the writing and how I was taking in the information, because I didn't like it. I just could not pay attention, could not listen to it. So I DNF'd it and I never looked back. All right, the next one, I actually don't know if I'll be able to adequately tell you how much I disliked this book and how sad I was about it. It's Disorientation by Elaine Shea Chow. Okay, there are discussions within this book that are very worthwhile. Discussions around topics of race and the fetishization of Asian women. And one other thing that I don't really want to mention because it's kind of a plot twist that kind of is a spoiler, but things revolving around those topics, I am not discrediting those because those were the only good parts of this story. However, our main character in this story was insufferable. I hated being in her mind. There, I said it. She's trying to write her dissertation on this famous Chinese poet, and in her studies, she finds a note in one of the archives within the library of like things that she's researching. And it sends her on this wild goose chase because she thinks that someone left that note for her because the note alluded to something much bigger, is what the synopsis, I think, kind of alludes to. It like changes her whole life trajectory and how she views things. And boy, did she need it. Because this girl, I'm telling you, was one of the most ignorant characters I've ever experienced. Because one, she has this boyfriend that is so controlling, emotionally kind of abusive towards her. And not only that, but I just don't understand how she doesn't see it. But every year on a birthday, I don't remember if it was hers or his, I don't remember, he has her dress up as an anime character before they have sex, and is very conscious of what she's eating and putting in her body, making sure that she doesn't gain weight, all of these things, very controlling. And I do understand the grooming aspects of relationships and how toxic it can get without you even realizing. However, there were certain situations described within the book, within her relationship with him, as well as her like academic life, where she was going to this rally where they're protesting because the theater department casted a white person as a Asian character when there were Asian students trying out for that part. And our main character goes to this rally not because she believes in it, but she goes into it and is rationalizing in her mind, saying that she's undercover to see why these people are doing what they're doing and to like pick their brains. And like, I don't know, like, it just didn't make sense. On top of that, in that situation, one of the other people that were protesting said the word triggered, like, you know, you get triggered by something. And the main character like literally said, and I quote, "I'll have to Google that word later. I don't know what that means." What do you mean? You are a college level like grad student. Not only is this like the 21st century, even if this book is written in the 20th century, like you should be able to use context clues to understand what that word could mean. I don't know. There were just little things like that. I remember listening to this book and getting to a certain part and thinking like, oh, this has to be done soon, right? It was only 50% of the way through. And I died a little bit when I saw that because I really just, I was so annoyed. And I will redeem the book a little bit because by the end of the story, our main character really did have some like spiritual awakening. She's very different from the beginning to the end of the book. And that was the only redeeming quality, as well as the discussions that I brought up earlier. But man, I just, it made me mad. I think this was a 2-star for me. The next one, if you watched one of my recent videos, you know how I feel about it, and it's Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I have now realized that I do have a vast amount of people who I found that do agree with me. I was very surprised because to my knowledge, everyone and their mother loved this book, and I don't know why. It was so fantasy convenient. Nothing was a struggle for the main character. The world on paper sounds so awesome. The synopsis was stunning. I was so excited to read this book. I had pretty high hopes for it because everyone was loving it. Again, the synopsis, it sounded great. But again, very surface level. Nothing was delved into. There was no journey for anything that happened. I talked about it in my vlog for it, but if a issue was presented to the main character, they were like, oh, now we have to go do this battle. The next page, they're doing the battle. There was no like getting ready for the journey, going on the journey, experiencing like the trials and tribulations of what's going on while building up to the big battle scene. It was like, oh, there's this problem. The next page is doing the battle scene. And I just like, I hate that. I really love a journey. I love a slow burn, like, let's figure things out. And everything just happened so easily for our main character. And it just drove me crazy. I didn't even finish it. I DNF'd this book with 100 pages left because how she came to one of the final things that she was trying to find, it was too much. I got so mad because it was such a humongous task that she was to accomplish. 2 pages later, they're at the first thing and they already found it. I couldn't. So I DNF'd it. It's not my type of fantasy. The culture surrounding the story, love it. The idea, great. Execution and writing style is not what I like. So that's it. That's it. The next book that I read and really didn't like at all was When Women Were Dragons by, what's her name? Kelly Barnhill. That's right. So many people love this book too. I just don't understand. I guess, okay. This book, I kind of understand a little bit more. It's not terrible, all right? It's not terrible. On the surface, this book had like everything that I would love, you know? Dragons, for one. Discussions on queer identity and sexuality. And you know, the concept of biting back at all the oppressive men in your life. And I was expecting an adult novel, which it is advertised as this author's first like debut adult novel, whatever you want to say. It's not adult in my eyes. It felt very young, which that isn't a problem, but I feel like there was false advertisement. I feel like what I was expecting because of what I was reading about what the book contained, I was very unpleasantly surprised. There was just no adult concepts that were really brought to the table, and so I was very underwhelmed by whatever discussions were brought on because it didn't feel like we actually talked about them. It was just either overtly stated or very much brushed under the rug and not really discussed at all. But a big thing that I didn't like about the story, and this could be just a personal preference for me, I did not like the depictions of dragons in the story. Besides the fact that, you know, these women are turning into dragons and eating their oppressive husbands before they fly off. Phenomenal. Love that vibe. However, like, where did they go? Like, I wanted to follow the dragons. I wanted to be with them and see like where they're going. And then without telling overtly what happened, because I'm trying to avoid spoilers, the way that the dragons were talked about towards the end of the book, I know that it was more like human-esque things that were going on, but thinking of dragons in that way for me just led to me seeing them as a cartoon and not these like huge, majestic, powerful beasts, which I also recognize is kind of the point, that women are majestic, powerful beasts, right? I recognize that, but I don't like how the story did it, or just the story, I guess. I just personally felt like the dragons in my mind were coming across as cartoony, and that's not how I like my dragons. So I can see why this book in particular could be a high-rated book for some people, but there were just too many things just like they weren't up my alley, didn't like, and it was just falsely advertised in my opinion, and I just can't get past it. I just didn't get what I thought I was gonna get. I gave it a 2. I wonder if I even gave any books a 1 star this year. I don't even know if I did. I'm pretty like generous with my stars. Unless there are really big things that really grind my gears, you'll get like a 3 to a 5, you know? If it's less than a 3, I really didn't like it. Okay, the next book that fell flat for me was actually Chouette by Claire Ostetsky. This book. Okay, this was another DNF for me, and I will explain why. I see Chouette very similarly to how I see Night Bitch. Both of these stories are fundamentally about motherhood. Night Bitch in particular, loved it, 5 stars. This one focused on the mother during motherhood. How the mother had to give up her artistic dreams for a while, had to focus on mothering her child, but then she started feeling this like feral instincts, these like patch of fur on the back of her neck, and she legitimately thought that she was turning into a dog. And it follows that whole thing. Very strange. They're both very weird books. However, Chouette is, again, about motherhood, but it focuses on the act of mothering. And these are two very important distinctions for me, because Night Bitch focuses on the mother and her development as a mother and her herself, like going through what is going on, while Chouette was more, again, focused on the act of caring for the child. From what I can remember, there weren't many internal dialogues of what the mother was going through, how she was herself dealing with things. And that is why I loved Night Bitch so much, because it was about those things. And both of them were very strange, obviously, very abstract and weird books. However, Chouette was honestly too weird and abstract for me. I never thought I would say that, but it was just a little bit too blurry along the lines for what I liked. And maybe I feel this way about this book because I'm not a mother, but following this story about mothering so closely and emotionally, while the story being so raw but so blurry and abstract, it was just not it for me. It was too much and also not enough because I was confused. To be honest. So I ended up not finishing it, and therefore I didn't actually give it a rating. The next book that disappointed me was Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. Actually, I read Skyward this past year, obviously, as well as Starsight. I love Skyward. Gave it 5 stars. It was absolutely hilarious. So much fun, a lot of action, loved the characters so much, and I was very excited to go into Starsight as well. However, I was warned that it's not as good as Skyward. They were right. It did not hold up to Skyward at all. The way that the story progressed into Starsight, we don't follow our same set of characters. We are led to a different place entirely, and therefore are introduced to different people. And they had not even half of the amount of depth as the characters did in Skyward. So many times I just caught myself thinking like, man, I wish that our old characters were here, because nothing was giving. None of the characters in Starsight were that interesting. The plot at hand also just was not as intriguing as the previous story as well. I don't think that the writing suffered at all. I just didn't like the progression of the story. I was let down by losing the amount of affection that I had towards everyone in the first book and not getting that same feeling towards anything else in the second book. Like, even though those characters weren't there, I still wish that there was something else along the storyline that made me feel attached to the story, and there really wasn't much that I could find there. The only reason it got the rating that it did from me, I think it was 3 stars, was the plot twist at the end that kind of changed how you viewed a couple of the characters, and they were just cute. They were fun little plot twists that I really did enjoy. However, the overarching story itself just fell flat for me. It was just a little bit boring. The next book that fell flat for me is The Maid by Nita Prose. Y'all, this won Best Mystery Thriller of 2022. Like, why? For what? This is another book that I didn't hate, but it was very underwhelming for me. One of the main things that people would tell me is, oh my god, you're gonna love the main character. She's so cute. You'll just want to put her in your pocket and take her home. And you're not wrong. I did like the main character. She was really the only thing that saved the book for me, I guess, because I love the neurodivergent representation, but the story itself was just not exciting. It felt like a lukewarm mystery thriller. It was interesting enough for me to read it and obviously finish it, but when I did finish it, it was just kind of like, yeah, that's it. I'm done. There was no moment that like my heart rate was increasing or I was very excited to, you know, turn the page, keep turning the page. It was just an okay story for me. The fact that it was so hyped, it was a disappointing read. And the fact that it won Goodreads Choice, like, I didn't vote in that category because I hadn't read like hardly any of the choices, but I am hard pressed to say that there are other books on that list that should have won. And I guess to make it an even 10, the last book that disappointed me this year was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a booktube favorite. Everyone loves this book. And for what? It's not bad. Again, this isn't a bad book. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it is so overhyped. It is so overhyped. I think that I didn't love it because I grew up watching Law & Order SVU, so like I knew what was happening. I knew where it was going. But even more so, and this is a me problem, I will admit I couldn't get past it because I just couldn't. The pure fact that this book revolved around our main character doing a school project on a past student who got murdered, and she was trying to clear the name of the person who everyone thinks it is. I just know for a fact that that would not have flown in any high school. And I know that she presented the idea of the project to her teacher in a different manner to where it sounded a little bit more conspicuous. It doesn't matter. I don't care. I genuinely don't think that this would have been able to happen in anywhere. Like, what teacher would allow anything, any school project revolving around a dead classmate? Like, it doesn't make sense. That was a huge thing for me. I just like couldn't get past it, which is silly, but I don't know what to tell you. That, in addition to just not being super excited to pick up the book because I kind of felt like I knew what was going on and had no burning fire, you know, to be proven right or wrong. Again, it wasn't a bad book. I was interested enough to finish it, obviously, but I do think that this book is way overhyped. I'm sorry, I had to say it. Well, that's all I have. Please let me know down in the comments if you agree with me on any of these, or if you don't, then take a centering breath and realize that I'm not coming for you. But let me know what books you hated this year. Would love to know. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I always appreciate your support, and of course, be kind to one another and happy reading. Bye.